Welcome back, everybody. Hope you're having a great day. We are riding the woo train, Jason. We don't do this often, but if we're going to discuss the things that cannot be explained, crazy experiences, some of them downright scary, who better than Mr. Whitley Strieber himself, the legendary storyteller?
Yeah, no, you know what? I remember, Louis, when I was a kid, I would go to the library downtown and I would take out every UFO book that I could, except Communion, because that book scared the crap out of me, just the cover of it itself. And it took me years. I just read the book maybe 5 years ago. It took me this long to be able to read it. But, you know, Whitley's such a pioneer in this, Louis, like his work with other abductees, people like Bud Hopkins and John Mack. You know, he's at the top of the list. We definitely will learn something from today for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. And we're going to ask him some viewer questions. We polled our audience on Facebook a couple weeks ago and said, "Hey, what do you guys want us to ask Whitley?" So we have our list here. I got a big fat list. Jason's got a big fat list. We're going to see what we can make of it. But more than anything, we are humbled. I mean, this gentleman's been doing this for years.
Yeah.
I tried to find a book list. I stopped at 46. I mean, he must be upgraded because how can some people, we've had many authors, and some of them tell us it takes 5-10 years to write a book properly. How can somebody have done so much in such a short lifespan without, you know, some kind of special skill or something? And maybe that's as a result of his experiences. We'll ask him that. But yeah, it's going to be an exciting day. We're going to go down the woo train. Whitley is the self-proclaimed king of woo, but we want to keep this on the terms of UAP. What do we know? What can we safely say we don't know? And let's keep our wits about us. So it's going to be a fun time. Let's roll the music here. We'll be right back in just a moment with Mr. Whitley Strieber right here on UAP Studies Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of UAP Studies Podcast. My name is Louis Borges. Joining me as always, my good friend, Mr. Jason Gilmet.
How's it going, Louis?
It's going great. We're in the house with the ultimate storyteller, Mr. Whitley Strieber. We are, as you said before we started recording, we're geeking out big time today. One of our favorite people that we haven't yet spoken to. So this is a great opportunity for us. And if anybody is unfamiliar with him, we're going to have him explain sort of what got him into all this and his experiences. So today's guest is an award-winning author. I did a book search and I found like 46 titles. I'm sure there are more. I don't know how somebody can complete this in a one human lifetime.
Workhorse.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Maybe Whitley has been upgraded because his work would certainly allude to that. Obviously, his most popular book in this topic is Communion, written in 1987. And we'll also chat about his recent book, Them. But Whitley also has a show called Dreamland, which is hosted on the UNX network, the network that we are also broadcasted on. So we're super excited. We can't wait to chat with them. So a big welcome to the show, Mr. Whitley Strieber.
Well, it's great to be here, and thank you very much for inviting me. I'm always glad to do this. It's important.
Absolutely, yeah. And we understand you are in the UK at the moment. There's a bit of a storm happening, so your laptop was getting a bit of a delay. So you're on your mobile device, but thank you for making this happen. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
So for some of the people in our audience that are fairly new to the topic, that aren't as familiar with yourself, shame on you. But if you haven't heard of Whitley Strieber, tell us what happened December 26, 1985, Whitley.
Well, I was asleep in bed in a cabin in upstate New York. I was married. My wife was beside me. My 7-year-old son was downstairs in his bedroom. And it was a perfectly ordinary night, the night after Christmas. It had been a very beautiful afternoon with light snow and evening. And we'd gone on a walk and had a post-Christmas dinner of leftovers. And it was a very pleasant way to spend a day. And we went to bed about 9:30. Everything was perfectly quiet and perfectly normal in every way. Until in the middle of the night, I believe I became aware of movement or noises. And I opened my eyes. And the first thing I saw were these big black insect eyes staring at me. I thought, oh God, you're having a nightmare here, Whitley. I actually crossed my mind. And, I was writing horror novels. I hadn't written in some years, but I had written a number of horror novels. And I thought maybe this is an idea here for me. But the face took on an ominous and very real quality. And I started trying to wake myself up and be back in bed. But my bed was not there. I was somewhere else on a more like a cot, a little narrow cot. And I was naked and I had been in pajamas, and I began to be assaulted, and it became very terrifying. I didn't know what to make of this. I was raped with a machine, a device that was thrust into my rectum and caused an erection and an ejaculation that was taken in a little silver tube, and one of these little spindly creatures ran away with it. And by that time, I was in an insane panic. I was absolutely terrified and screaming, obviously, because there was a machine-like voice that kept saying, "What can we do to help you stop screaming?" And it ended at some point after that. They shot a needle into the side of my head, and I remembered saying, "You'll ruin a beautiful mind." But they did it anyway. And the next morning, I don't have any real memories of the way the thing ended. So I woke up and I was feeling very bad. I was not comfortable. And I noticed something. I thought to myself, what happened? And I asked my wife if there had been any disturbance in the night, and she said, no, it was quiet. And then I decided there must have been an owl in the house because I could remember these big eyes. But the problem was there's no way an owl could have gotten into the house at all, let alone gotten out if it did get in. So that wasn't it. And over the next few days, I became increasingly distressed. I began to remember bits and pieces of what had happened. And I was completely confused and blindsided because I knew nothing whatsoever about alien abductions or anything like that. And I didn't even know that could happen. And I went through a long period of struggle with my doctor, trying to figure out what was going on. And at one point, I described my experience to him. And he said, well, Whitley, it sounds like you're telling me you were taken aboard a flying saucer by little men. Then I thought, oh my God, I'm losing it. I'm going crazy. And I tried to get Anne to leave me because I thought if she turned out to be married to a psychotic, she couldn't get a divorce and I would come unable to work. So it was an awful time in our lives, those next few months. But eventually I took all kinds of physical tests and psychological tests, and there was nothing identifiably wrong with me. So I eventually decided, and I've been trying to get her to divorce me, and our marriage was really on the rocks because of all this. And I sat down with her, and she was tearing up because she thought I was going to ask for a separation. I told a friend, Timothy Greenfield Saunders, what I remembered previous to talking to Anne, because how do you tell somebody a thing like that? And I finally said to her, honey, I think I was taken aboard a flying saucer by little men. And she looked at me and I looked back at her. And she said, oh, thank God. Now I don't have to get a divorce. Or she may have said, oh, thank God. And I thought you were crazy. She said one of those two things. And we just sort of flew into each other's arms. And that was when the rest of my life began, really. and hers too.
And you had mentioned in your book, I believe I may be wrong, but when that entity was telling you, "What can we do to make you quiet?" you had said something to the effect of, "Let me smell you." And do you remember that? Do you remember that smell? Have you ever had anything that is close to that smell?
Not well. It's been a long time. I recall writing that it smelled like cinnamon,
Right.
But I don't directly remember the odor anymore.
Right.
But it was a dry, not very organic odor, as I recall. Cinnamon would be the best way to describe it, a little sweet edge to it.
Right.
Yeah, so I did ask that because I think I was instinctively trying to ground myself and find some place in reality where this would fit.
Yeah. And your son also had an abduction in later years as well. I remember hearing you tell a story about that. Maybe you could
share. A lot of the children who came to the cabin did, and we told their parents what was happening. And if you don't want your children to get involved in this, don't send them. But everyone sent them anyway. And there were quite a number. We also had a few human witnesses, adult witnesses at this cabin as well.
And when it comes down to this phenomenon, which is crazy, but having read your work, Bud Hopkins and John Mack, which the three of you are really the major pioneers in this field of study. What's amazing is you got two sort of events. You got the one-offs, which is just somebody driving down the road, all of a sudden something happens, they get taken. In your case, in other families, it seems to run in the family. So mom and dad had an experience, you're having an experience, the kids have an experience. Like, it follows the family line. What can you tell us a bit about that? Like, what have you discovered?
Not much that I could put my finger on. There does seem to be a family connection, though. In my case, it has to do with the Roswell incident, because one of my uncles was at the Air Materiel Command in Roswell. I mean, right at Wright Field, when the debris was brought from Roswell. So while I didn't know anything about this at the time, after the book was published, he did level with me about this, and so it was in the family, and I think it runs down family lines somehow. I'm not the only person who's had members of their family engaged to, and then they were also engaged later. So there's a familial connection. And in fact, in one of the letters in them, what we did was Anne collected all of the communion letters, and around 30,000 of them.
Wow.
Ended up in an archive at Rice University in Texas. Thankfully, they were preserved by a wonderful man, my co-author on Supernatural, Jeff Kripal. And one of those letters involves a woman who's was abducted with her daughter in the desert in Arizona, and they were kept separately, much to the woman's discomfort. But the daughter eventually said that she was an alien, and not that she was an alien, but that the aliens, had told her that she was very ill and she couldn't be cured. And the mother had been told that she and the daughter were members of a very, very ancient family, and that these family members that were there were her family, essentially. So there was a familial connection of some kind. The little daughter did develop a few months later a rare form of cancer, and she did die. So it was a very profound and intense experience, of course, all the way down the line. Not only what happened to me, but the things that happened to other people, and the things that fit a general category of being similar to other stories or worth witnessing anyway. quite a few of those. So it's a very strange experience, but it's got something to do with family. There's no question about that.
Yeah. Right. Before recording today's show, we polled our audience and said, hey, if anyone's got some cool questions for Whitley, send them our way. And you mentioned Jeff Kripal, and that was one of the questions brought up. And somebody had said, ask him about his incident in a hotel with Jeff Kripal. And he told me roughly what had taken place, and I found it fascinating. So maybe I can get you to tell the same story.
Okay, can you run it by me again?
So the story, as the viewer had said, was that you were sharing a hotel room with this gentleman, and they were sort of 50-50 on the phenomenon, and something happened throughout the night to make them.
Oh, Jeff, believer. Yeah, right. Sharing with Jeff.
Yeah,
I was. Yeah, well, that was not a hotel room. I was at the Esalen. That's what threw me off. I was trying to remember this happening in a hotel room, and it never has with someone else. It happened at the Esalen Institute in Big Sur.
Okay.
And when I go to the Esalen Institute, they usually put me in a certain room which overlooks the Pacific and is a kind of place that someone could easily, especially someone who could fly, could easily enter from the outside without being disturbed. And quite a few people over the years have wanted to stay in the same room with me to see if something would happen. And one or two times it has. And one of those times was with Jeff. And Jeff was, I was sleeping beside the window, and there's a little deck and a bit of lawn and then a cliff in the Pacific beyond that. And I was there in the middle of the night. That was a time when the visitors were waking me up pretty regularly at 3:00 in the morning to do an exercise I call the sensing exercise, which is an exercise of attention to place the attention on the physical body that you do to over time. It gradually engages the second or ethereal body, and it takes many years. I've been doing it now for 60 years. But when they came into my life after my wife died in 2015, they wanted a lot more, and they specifically wanted it done at 3:00 in the morning. And the reason is that this is a time which in some yoga traditions is called Brahma Muhurta time, or the time of greatest openness of the mind. So I was doing the exercise then, and I did the exercise. And a short time later, Jeff had a very intense experience. What happened to me was one of these little figures came in the window in the doorway, and because they had a door as well as a window out onto the deck, and blew on my hand. And a moment later, while I was still awake, it woke Jeff up, I believe, by blowing on his finger or his hand. And so when he experienced this, he experienced a collapse of worldview. He no longer cared about the details of what was happening. What he experienced was a kind of implosion of his sense of reality. And when the entity touched him, he heard his own voice coming from deep within his body saying, "Oh my God." And then it was like glass crashing all around him. And I'm pretty sure this is what he said, or something very close to it. And there's a sense of annihilation when they come to you. And I think that, in my opinion, my theory is, that it is a reaction to the fact that they are coming in from outside of time. We live in the time stream like fish swimming in water, and the threat of taking us out of the stream of time literally destroys our reason for living. We're here to experience, to have sequential experience, and an always sense of the new about everything that's happening. And when they come near you, there's the threat exists that you will come out of that state. And the second you do, you see your whole future and your whole past. And we're here to have novel experience, for it to be imprinted on our minds as if it was our souls, as if it was entirely new. And the threat of being pulled out of the time stream is what is so frightening to people. And it's what frightened Jeff and made him feel like the world was ending at that moment, in my opinion. So that's pretty much that story.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's crazy too, because if they do have control over manipulation of time, like a lot of people have commented, the quietness that comes with it. Like I was talking to one of the twins in England. I forget their names now. They'll come to me in a minute. But he was describing it almost like a snowfall. And when you have a nice quiet snowfall is super quiet. He says it was just like that. And it seems like time is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. And you're stuck in this different perspective or worldview. And in your case, like my heart goes out to you and anybody else that has these reoccurring experiences, because I can't imagine what it's like to be pulled out of bed at 3 a.m., have these quick, just snippets of memory of what took place. And then the next day you got to go to work and you got to face everybody. Everybody's not aware of what you're going through. And there's thousands of people in the world going through that, if not a million. And it's horrible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
like
thank you for saying it's horrible, because it's pretty difficult. That's for certain.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is this business of being threatened by, it's not, they're not threatening us intentionally. It's their proximity that may draw us out of the stream of time. And the second you're drawn out of the stream of time, you're going to know your whole life, not just from this life, but from all lives. If there is a such thing as an afterlife, you will know it all in just a second. And where then is the reason for living? There is none, not at all. You have no reason to be alive. And you've spent all this time and money and effort on becoming a living part of the world order. And it's just premature to assume that we could form classes with the visitors or something and make a lot of this. We're going to have to take a long, hard journey in order to find our footing with this.
Right.
Yeah. And I like how you refer to them as the visitors. And I've heard you say that they may not be extraterrestrial, not necessarily. Right. And the first thing that came to my mind is Michael Paul Masters. We've interviewed him before on our show. He has his theory, which is the extraterrestrial theory. Now, as somebody who is, an archaeologist, an anthropologist, he's looking at the evolution of man. And his theory is that if you just fast forward evolution a couple million years, we get the big bulbous foreheads, our eyes will change, we're no longer hunting and gathering, therefore the spindly arms. And even to the point of like Philip Corso in his book, The Day After Roswell, said that these beings had human genomes. So I wanted to get your opinion on the visitors. Where do you think they're coming from? And is there a chance they could be us in the future, just looking different due to evolution? Perhaps we live in a different planet, different gravity. What are your thoughts on who these visitors actually are?
The question is still completely open from beginning to end. And there are people out there who have decided where they're from, what planets they're all from, who's at war with who else, and all of that. And that's all, as far as I'm concerned, it's all unproven. And, you can't say someone is a military whistleblower and then say that they said this, and because they were in the military, it must be true. It doesn't work that way. First, it's a pretty rare thing when somebody gives up classified information to the public. There's a case in point going on right now where a young man gave serious case in point information to foreign powers, and because he wanted to show his friends on the internet how U.S. intelligence really worked. So you have a situation where it's not really useful, I don't think, to try to speculate about where they're from. because we can't know as things now stand. What is useful and important is to try to make the relationship work from our end. And later on, we can make the relationship work, hopefully, from other ends. But basically, uh, uh, this relationship, such as it is too unknown to pin down. Like people will say, oh, well, if it's not aliens, it must be interdimensionals. Well, what in the world does that word mean? I don't even know what it means. It doesn't mean anything to me. But I think that there's also a possibility that movement through time may be possible. And if that's the case, then I think it's inevitable that they would be here.
Right.
Well said.
Yeah. Because even, looking at people like Michio Kaku, who talks about different classes of civilization, humans are not even a class 1 civilization. But you expand that to, let's say, not only our galaxy, but the universe at large, any advanced civilization that is higher class than us has more of an understanding of the reality of what this all is. And we used to have science and philosophy used to be one and the same, and somehow they both went apart. I think this phenomenon requires both of these things to come back together, because it's not just the nuts and bolts like Louis and I love to talk about as well, but there's also this other aspect of it as well. That is consciousness. What does it mean for our place as a society? What does it mean as an individual? This topic bleeds in every aspect of everybody, everyday life. And this is what I think maybe disclosure is hard to bring about, because it sort of shatters the lies and contributions that we do for society. I mean, it's all human stuff, that it's not applicable to space and time, right? It's just our delusions. We all contribute to it, but this phenomenon is real.
I discussed this business of disclosure extensively in the second part of my book, Them, the new book. And I don't think the government's in a position to tell what's really going on. They can't do that. And here's why. In order to do that, they have to either tell a really monstrous lie and say all of the abductees are liars or they're delusional. And that's a terrible thing to do to those people, because they know very well they're not liars, and they're not, they think of themselves as valid people. And then to go on and say that that since it's not happening, that the abductions aren't happening, this all is not happening, and it's all delusional in people's minds. Like a few months ago, there was an article in the Wall Street Journal by an aviator who'd worked U-2s and was obviously quite well known in his community, saying, why don't we just get rid of all this UFO stuff? My parents have never seen a UFO. I've never seen one. None of my colleagues on the flight path ever have seen one. And the truth is that a lot of people do see them. They are there, and the government can't do a darn thing about it. And you get from that point to the stealing of semen and eggs. And of course, the government doesn't want to do anything about it. They'd rather we give them hell.
Right. Do you think it's above the pay grade of the government at this point? Like, is this so far out that's above their pay grade?
I think it's been put above the pay grade by the visitors themselves. The visitors engineered this abduction program. They put us in a position, the government in a position, where they can't go out and say, yes, people are being abducted. Yes, their sexual material is being stolen. Yes, their children are affected. And no, we can't do anything about it. And no, we don't understand why it's being done. They can't do that, because that renders the most fundamental promise of government fallacious. The government is there to protect us. And if it cannot do so, then it's failing in its duty. And in this case, not only is it unable to do so, it has been very cagey about writing about this. I mean, about admitting anything about this, because they don't want to let the cat out of the bag. They don't want to be seen as powerless, and they don't want to be seen as someone, in which they have done, that use social engineering to dismiss the claims of the close encounter witnesses, and in some cases, even to get them into mental institutions. And that is just terribly wrong. They can't admit it. They can't.
Yeah.
I think if disclosure comes, it's going to come from the visitors, not from the government.
And to that point on the government, I had a memo sent to me. I think it was from 1973, and it was from the legendary remote viewer Pat Price. And he was writing a memo to Hal Puthoff, basically insinuating that the visitors have already infiltrated state, government, religion. They don't care about our day-to-day mundane lives, but they do care about not being revealed, and they've infiltrated certain positions in order to maintain that. And I was blown away, because we all know Hal Puthoff very well. We're also familiar with remote viewing and the accuracy of a lot of those things. So do you have any thoughts on, because you just kind of mentioned that it is their decision, really. Do you think this has gone as far as they are in government and perhaps the leaders of religion, and to that extent, to keep this a secret?
I think that they will do what they have to keep the secret, because this abduction program is important to them, and they have no intention of allowing it to fail. Now, that said, the abductions have dropped off dramatically in the past few years. They're very rare now. And I think it could be that part of their program here is over. And what they may do next, I can't predict. But I do know that someone like Hal, whom I also know very well, is not in a position to make that decision. And in fact, nobody is in a position to make that decision. The visitors are going to either show up or not show up, and we will have a decision of some kind when that happens. I'm sorry to say.
Yeah. What is your best guess for the reasoning behind the abduction phenomenon? And is it genetics that they need? Or do they need to boost themselves up? Is this a hybrid program? Again, nobody knows, but what is your best guess as to why the sexual nature of some of these abductions?
Well, I can only tell you what I've observed. And this is what I have observed. Sexual material was taken from me in 1988. And in 1993, or early 94, just before we left the cabin, the summer before that, a person showed up in our woods. He looked like a very wizened sort of 11-year-old boy. He did not look like an adult. And I think he'd been living rough out there for some time. And the way I located him was by my sense of smell, because I mean, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here. Let me see how I can put this. I located him. I saw him. I found this person in the woods behind our house, and he was smoked all the time. He was obviously very disturbed. He looked like an 11-year-old boy who was so unhealthy that his skin was already wrinkling. It was a terrible thing. And he warned me off by growling at me when I walked up to him. He was smoking under a tree near some very volatile trees called pitch pines. And he was, I was afraid he would cause a fire in the pitch pines. And I wanted to warn him about that. And as I walked up to him, he made this deep growling sound. And I thought to myself, there's something very odd here. And at that point, had had plenty of oddness in my life, believe me. And I went back to the house. And after that, we noticed the smell of the cigarette smoke would come up at night, and I could feel him in my mind, and it felt like he was saying and listening a moment ago. It felt like he was listening to my thoughts, and it was incredibly creepy. And we went skinny. Annie and I went skinny dipping once, and our pool was quite private, and he was beside himself. He was running up and down in the woods behind the pool. There was a lot of foliage. It was late summer, and so you couldn't see him, but you could hear him running up and down and cracking sticks and gasping and going on, like us exposing ourselves naked out in the open was just the worst thing we could possibly do. And so we went back in the house, and a few months later, we lost the cabin and we left. And we drove down to Texas to end up living in a little condo in San Antonio, my hometown. There was a cul-de-sac beside the condo. It was on the ground floor. And it wasn't but a few nights after we arrived there that I became aware of the fact that someone was standing in that cul-de-sac. And it was him. And there was cigarette smoke began to drift into the apartment, and I could again feel him in my mind. I tried to engage with him a couple of times, and he couldn't handle it. And so finally, I put a motion-sensitive light in the cul-de-sac, and when he went into it, every time he moved, the light would turn on, and he would gasp and go on. And finally, one morning, I was working in the little garden we had there, and he came barreling out around the side of the building and went marching off down the street. And that was the last I saw of him. But it wasn't the end of the story, because there were two men living in an apartment immediately behind ours, and he was somehow associated with them. And they were not of this world. They looked human, but they were absolutely not of this world. And I finally called the management of the condo and said that, these people were very unusual, and they had a boy with them. There was no evidence that they were related or anything. And I just wanted to know who they were, because I wanted to engage with them and talk to them and see what was going on there. And the management guy says, well, there's no one in that apartment. It's empty. That it's owned by a man in Houston, and he only uses it when he comes up to San Antonio. So they gave me his number, and I called him, and he said, I'm sorry, but my apartment is not occupied. And I said, no, there are 3 people living in it. So he had them evicted. And when the eviction notice came due, it was pasted on the door. They came through the whole condo, and everyone in the condo knew about this at this point. There are a lot of people did anyway, certainly in our part of it, trying to sell the man's furniture to us, like we would buy the furniture of someone when we knew perfectly well they were squatters. And they left. And I had seen one of them in a drugstore down the road from us, during the whole course of this experience. And he had been stealing smoking materials and putting them in big shopping bags. I mean, this is back in the days when that stuff was all out on shelves. It wasn't kept back like it is now. And it was blatant. And everyone else in the store except me was just standing there looking out straight ahead. They weren't doing anything. And he walks out of the store, walks out beside me with this sinister and amused expression on his face as he walks past me. And boy, I'm telling you, I was looking at someone from another world. But he was also human looking. And the boy, in my opinion, came about because of the sexual material that was taken from me, and God knows how he was created, whether he was a hybrid or someone genetically altered or something, but he was definitely not completely human. And you extrapolate that into the government and into the world at large, and you just don't know what might be going on here. Not at all. And if people who say that this has been infiltrated, they've been infiltrated into the government, could be right. I mean, they could very well be right, because I saw 3 of these people and interacted with one of them pretty extensively, the boy, and they were physical beings, and they were very unusual. They had the ability to read minds. They could control people's minds from a distance. This happened. I saw it.
And this phenomenon, I mean, mind control, especially on humans, seems to be very strong. Not only do they have the capabilities of immobilizing us by making us not be able to move, and a lot of people will only focus on the fact that people reporting abductions at night have the problem of not being able to move out of bed, but there's actually several cases of people in broad daylight that are all of a sudden paralyzed. They can't move in the presence of these entities. So there's a control there that, and even the mind control. I mean, it's scary to think about as an individual that you have no control at all in the presence of these entities, that you're somehow just at their disposal and at their will.
Here's a question for you, and it's a rhetorical question. I know I'm the one being interviewed.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't they do more? Why
Mm.
are they so hidden? Why are they so hesitant? Why are they so shy if they have all this power? I've seen the power of the mind that they have. It's real. But, I mean, they use it to steal cigarettes and pipe tobacco and stuff, not to rob a bank. Hello. I mean,
Yeah.
what kind? There's a screw loose somewhere there. And I tell you, it's not our screw that's theirs.
Yeah.
I think what we're looking at here is some kind of an attempt to create a bridge species between us and whatever the other is. And I think it failed. And these people are out here in the world, basically kind of hung out to dry, and nobody supporting them and nobody cares about them anymore because they didn't work out. That's my strongest suspicion about what's going on here.
Right.
Yeah, it would make sense. And to the point of the varied array of phenomenon, I've heard you mention that you've seen weird images on TV. There's been times you felt like electrostatically charged. You've seen craft, lights, beings, even an implant. So tell us, let's get the implant thing out of the way. I find that fascinating. Tell us about your ear implant.
Yeah, well, it's right here under the earphone at the moment. And here's the story of the implant. In 1989, it was May of 1989. In one of my books, there's a misprint that says 1992, but don't be fooled. It was definitely May of 1989. It was a copy editing mistake. In any case, I was in bed in the country house, and my wife was asleep beside me, and all of a sudden, I heard the crunch of gravel in the driveway. And that was disturbing because it's 11 o'clock at night, no car lights, but clearly a vehicle out there. More disturbing, a big heavy gate across the driveway. So I had to drive around the gate, or God knows in this case, maybe over it. In any case, it's there. And I have, at this point, an array of floodlights all around the house, which can be turned on with a switch beside the bed. In the drawer beside the bed is a pistol, and under the bed a shotgun. So my immediate reaction is to start to go for the lights, because it's a car is arriving, but there's no evidence that anyone's there. So I need to light the area up. Then I plan to get the shotgun out and go to the window. That was my expectation. As I turned to go to the light switches, I saw 2 people at the foot of the bed, or across the hall. There was a hall door at the end of the far end of the bedroom, and the bed faced it. So they were standing in the hall door, and simultaneously I heard a male voice in the backyard say, "Condition red." Now, you notice a male voice, people. I'm not talking about aliens here. This was a people thing or a hybrid thing, but in any case, whoever did this looked like us. immediately I changed my plan. I'm going for the shotgun because there's people in the house. You understand, there's an alarm system, a very sophisticated one. It is turned on. It is not disarmed. I can see the red light on the LED right beside the bed with my own eyes at that moment, while the people are already in the house. I start to go for the shotgun, and the next thing I know, I'm lying on my side, on my right side. I am blinded. I can't see a thing. It's dark. I can't open my eyes. I can't move. Someone is pushing down on this side of my head, pushing it into the pillow in waves, like, like this, whoosh, whoosh. And the woman's voice is speaking very softly and gently. And then it ends. There's a big flash of light, a sound like people running through brush and then running through the woods. I am able to move. I jump up. I grab the pistol. I run through the house looking for open fenestrations. Everything is intact. There is no sign of any break-in, and the alarm system is still turned on. I end up sitting on the side of the bed thinking, what the hell happened? What happened? I decide it had to be a dream because the alarm system didn't go off and there's no window open or door or anything. So let me put it this way about sleeping for the rest of the night. That did not really happen. I lay there, a little nervous, terribly on edge, and kept turning the floodlights on and off. And then I, in the morning, the first thing I would always do is with Anne, I would say, first, did you notice anything? And if she said yes, I would ask her what she had noticed. And sometimes there were things. But this time I asked her, and she said, no, it seems that I only remember a quiet night. So I told her the whole story in detail. Then we went downstairs to make breakfast. Our son was waking up. He probably had a little friend with him, would be my guess. And we were making breakfast, and I thought I'll go out and get the paper. By that time I was dressed. And because you couldn't get the paper delivered there, and I'm a big newspaper reader, and there was no internet really then anyway. So I went out to the garage, and the garage was attached. I opened the door into the garage. The alarm system was still fully alarmed, but the garage door was wide open. But the alarm system was not sounding in any way whatsoever. It was functioning as if there was nothing open. And I had not looked in the garage during the night. I just looked at the windows. So then I knew someone had been in there. I called the alarm guy. He came and he found a very heavy-duty magnetic field free floating around the garage switch, which is what kept it from tripping. And he said, we have no equipment that could create a magnetic field this intense. All I can do is replace the switch, which he did. Okay, so I'm left with this. What the hell is it? Then a few days later, my ear starts to hurt. And I'm feeling it hit, and I feel a little bump in it, which I'm feeling right now. And I think to myself, holy God, I've got an implant. Because I knew Dr. Roger Lear at the time. I knew about alien implants. We tested people trying to find them, so it was no secret that they existed. But this was not aliens, I didn't think. Of course, it could have something to do with the hybrids. I don't know. In any case, I'm frantic. It hurts. I want it out of me. I feel like I'm being watched. It's terrifying. And Annie says, no, don't get it taken out. Let's see what it's for. And of course, I was always her experimental animal. Back when I decided I needed to go out into the woods at night to re-engage with the visitors. Once I realized they were real, I said, well, let's do this. Let's go out into the woods about 11 or 12 and just walk out to where I think it happened to signal to them that we're ready to engage in some way. And I thought it was probably dangerous as hell, but I was going to do it anyway, because after all, they were real. and she says, "Oh, fine, that's a great idea. You do it. I'll stay here at the house."
Yeah.
But so I did. I had done it, and I had re-engaged with him quite extensively, which is what the two books, Transformation and Breakthrough, are about that followed communion. In any case, going back to the implant, it would turn on, and the ear would get very hot, and there would be this sound in my head, and it has become a major part of my life. I tried to get it removed in the mid 90s, I guess about 95 or 96. And Annie said, "We'll make a compromise. You get one chance, but Whitley, I just have a feeling this thing is very important. And don't get it removed, but I'm not going to say no this one time." The doctor opens it up, and it's on video on my website.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And in the, yeah. And he says, "It's a white disc." She says, "It's a white disc." And he's looking at it. It moves down from here down into the bottom of my ear on its own to get away from the scalpel. That scares him, and he pulls out. Of course. I mean, you have to take my whole ear off to get it at that point. So 2 days later, it stings, burns like hell, and comes back up to where it is to this day. After Annie passes away, the implant comes to life. A slit opens up in my right eye. Now it's in my left eye, but in the beginning it was in my right eye. And you can see words racing through the slit at very great speeds. I'm told by some people who show up in the middle of the night and explain this thing to me some years later, about 2020, that what it's doing is drawing unthought thoughts up from my subconscious, and by that time I'm using it as a research tool, and I'm wondering what the words are because they move too fast for you to read, and they're explaining that these are things I have, information I have in my mind that relates to what I'm thinking about, but that I don't have direct access to. It's like an inspirational device that uses my unconscious as the source of its information. And I use it all the time now. It's my primo research tool. That's why the research in my books, in my opinion, has gotten of such extraordinarily high quality. In Afterlife Revolution, in A New World, in Jesus, A New Vision, and now in them, the research is very strong. And I think that this thing has something to do, and this puts a whole new level on the whole thing, with our own dead, and that the visitors are somehow connected with our dead and may even be humans in another form.
Right, because even talking with, it was Mindy, I think we were talking to Louis, and she had mentioned about her brain. I think she had an aneurysm or something, and she was talking about her consciousness being the same in her body to when she popped out of her body. There was no difference. Her consciousness was the same. She thought the same way. Like, it had nothing to do with her body and her mind. And the more we delve into it, I mean, there's a lot of subjects within the study of this phenomenon that seem woo-woo when you first start, but then the more you talk to people, the more those people are like, no, you need to look into it. There's a connection. And we're finding that more and more now as we're researching this and or I should say digging deeper into the phenomenon and how many branches it branches out on many different fields of study. As for you, because I'm just curious now, you're getting a little bit older, and I'm just wondering if your experiences with these entities has diminished somehow. Because I was speaking with some people that were saying that they were getting less and less visitations as they were getting older. That's not your case?
Not at all.
No?
I'm heavily engaged.
Okay.
And as far as woo-woo is concerned, I am Mr. Woo-woo when it comes to this stuff. And yet, I am describing my experiences accurately as I can. I would not argue that what I am saying and describing is exactly what happened, but I will argue this, it is the best I can do in terms of describing my own memories. So I think that when you talk to witnesses whose stories sound very logical and believable and reasonable, you're talking to people who have laundered their stories or not telling true stories, because this is no way is it logical, believable, and reasonable. It is completely crazy. It is unbelievable, and it is about as reasonable as a drunk on LSD.
Oh, I love that.
That's the fact.
Great analogy.
And,
yeah.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons I ended up so deep in this is I'm really good at describing things that are extremely strange. My mind does not get confused by the strangeness. It just never has. And in them, I go into an analysis of how the brain actually functions. And the human brain has a lot of trouble with novel experience. It will try to shoehorn that experience into something it already understands. And that's how you end up with folklore and imagination and all that stuff. For whatever reason, my gray matter doesn't do that. And in the book also, there is one letter where you can see the visitors were trying to take this person through an experience with them in such a way that their brain wouldn't confuse things, and that they took it step by step. So the brain always had something to rely on as it moved from one level of strangeness to the next. It was brilliantly done. So, they're here and they are trying to communicate with us. And by the way, there are 11 letters in them. Not one of them is a conventional abduction experience. Because when you go into the Communion Letters archive, you find the conventional abduction experiences are few and far between. The actual things that are happening to people are much, much stranger than the abduction experience.
Yeah. For me, one of the coolest things in the quest to try to find proof or to have somebody with some type of artifact or something is the thought of metamaterials. And we had Dr. Gary Nolan on a couple of, maybe 2 months ago, Jay, something like that.
Yeah.
And so I asked him about, arts parts, and I know you know all about it, but I explained, this was given from Art Bell to Linda Moulton Howe and then bought by TTSA and Gary Nolan. And as I'm talking, he's like rummaging for something off camera. So I just kept asking my question. And finally I said, like, what are you doing? You better be reaching for something. And he pulls out a piece of that exact magnesium bismuth layered, atomically engineered material. And he started to talk about it. Now, I know you had a piece of this as well. And
I've got a piece right now in my office in California. Absolutely.
Amazing. And I've heard you say that you believe this is not even from this universe, let alone from this planet. Now,
well, no, that's not quite accurate. There was a study done, and I could be wrong. I believe it was by Jacques Vallée, where they analyzed the isotopic ratios in some of the material. And understand, it's not just arts parts. When the Defense Department says they have no materials, they're probably not lying, because they are so screwed up in terms of their records, especially when it comes with this level of classification, where 50% or more of the meetings are all pencils up. And at this point in time, so much of the materials have been farmed out into private defense contractors that they don't even have records of them anymore. But in fact, there's a lot more than arts parts. Arts parts are just a little handful compared to what's available and what's there, and has been studied and used in processes that have been developed by us based on the way these materials operated and functioned. Back in 1986, before I even published Communion, I was trying to get some kind of a handle on the materials, but not on the materials. I didn't know about them at the time, but on whether or not there was any kind of physical evidence of this stuff. And Bud Hopkins introduced me to Stanton Friedman, who in turn introduced me to Dr. Robert Sauerbacher. And Dr. Sauerbacher was a metallurgist, a very high-placed metallurgist, and he's left letters that are public on the internet now. He didn't hold with secrecy, and he was very frank about the work he was doing. And he told me, yes, we have materials, and we have used them in all kinds of processes that we've developed and improved, creating things like super hard metals and something else. I think he said super durable coatings. He probably would have said radar deflecting coatings, but I think that was very classified at the time. But he didn't. He said he referred to coatings, and then he said to me, "I would like you to write down everything that has happened to you and send it to me as soon as you can," and gave me his address. And the next day, for the first time, it occurred to me I should write this down. And I wrote it all down on 5 or 6 sheets of paper, typed paper, and sent it to him overnight. I got a call from the UPS overnight guy a couple of days later saying that he couldn't deliver my parcel because the recipient had died. Dr. Sauerbacher died the day after we talked.
Wow.
And his family said he died of natural causes, but I don't know whether that was true or not. Scared the living daylights out of me, because at that time I was beginning to become aware that there was a lot of secrecy involved in this whole thing. And I thought, did someone kill him because he's talking too much? And I know enough about intelligence work to know that does happen. Mm-hmm. And so when you read Communion, I refer to it all very obliquely, not very directly, because I was scared to be more blatant about it. I tell the story in much more detail in them. Anyway, we have materials. We have been studying them for years. They have been, a lot of what has been found has been expressed into private industry and into the defense industry in various ways, and probably not just by the United States, probably by other countries as well. So that is what is real. And what Gary showed you is quite real. And what Jacques found, I'm getting back to that, was that the isotopic ratios in some of this material could not exist on Earth or anywhere in the known universe. The ratios were not of this world at all.
Yeah. And I asked Gary that. And again, he's a doctor, so he has his own, if you can't prove it, you can't talk about it. But I was asking about that. And I said, look, if this is supposedly a piece of a crash from the 40s, obviously it was kept for this many years because of its importance. The only way, and I'm not a physicist or, a scientist, but the only way you can rearrange isotopic ratio is through a particle accelerator. It didn't exist in the 40s. And again, we wanted to keep it friendly and happy. We're not in the habit of hammering on our guests. I sensed there was a reluctance to go there and to just let's stop talking about this. So I just said, look, to what you know or have been told, are we in possession of exotic materials that did not originate on this planet? And he threw me a bone and he said, I haven't seen it, but from what I've been told from high-ranking people, yes. So he confirmed it in a roundabout way. And that was good enough for me. But I just can't get over the fact that it's so hard to get that out of people. Like, there's no practical use for this stuff. The way it's layered and, nano layers thin, nobody would do that. The cost would be so astronomical to make a handful of it. There'd be no practical commercial.
No, it's more than the cost. The amount of energy necessary to alter isotopic ratios in that way is immense.
That's right.
I don't even know that we could do it technologically, even if we wanted to. Yeah. I mean, theoretically it's possible, yes, but I'm not at all sure we could do it. But it may be that the materials aren't from another level of reality or another universe, because you have to get really deep into the cracks of this experience to begin to understand it. And I can never forget the fact that one of the abductees was told many years ago, she heard one of them say, "We rearrange atoms." Anyone who can rearrange atoms can do essentially anything they want with the material world.
Yeah.
That statement, when I heard her say that, I thought to myself, this means that they are limitlessly powerful. They have control over the most fundamental level of material reality.
Yeah.
So we can't ever forget that. And as far as the bismuth magnesium layering is concerned, we examined that at Southwest Research many years ago and did a 600 power microscopic image of it. And the layers, it's foamed magnesium and then a layer of bismuth, like a sandwich with many layers, or a layer cake. But between the layers, it's just empty. There's nothing there. There's no adherent. So how are they kept together?
Yeah.
It sits in my office right now, and it's a miracle. It can't exist, but there it is.
Yeah, just even the technology of what people describe on these ships. In Hollywood, we fantasize a lot about what aliens are like, and we put a lot of our own nature in the alien nature, that they're here for our resources. They're here, basically invade us. The same Homo sapien nature, we inflect on them. We think that this is what they must be up to because we can't think the way that they think, right? It's an alien way of thinking. Even the experiences you're talking about, they're alien experiences. The brain cannot categorize it or put it in a box. They're foreign. They're alien to us. You were talking about the hybrids, and the hybrids could be kind of like a liaison between our species and their species. Two species trying to work together might not work, but if you have a middleman that can be on either side and sort of make connections and communion between entities, that makes sense. That sort of connection between us and them, there's got to be a middle guy, because otherwise it's going to be too foreign, too alien. We won't understand it. Their technology seems simplistic, but it's super complicated on the quantum level. Take it or leave it. Louis and I are huge fans of the story of Bob Lazar, and the way he describes about how this material looks just mundane, but it does the most amazing thing. And once you get down to the molecular level, it's not here. We can't do this. We can't reproduce this. And this supposedly is old technology. So their new technology must be a lot scarier, more impressive. And to us would just appear as magic. We wouldn't know the difference between, something that looks mundane,
The little piece I have is magic. It's adherent, but there's nothing gluing it together,
right?
Except empty space. That's magic.
Absolutely,
because it's not magic. It's something somebody understands, but not us. But let's talk a little bit about. Okay, I never say I'm sure they're aliens because I'm not. But let's assume that they are there. They're, as I say, visitors, and they are someone other than us. And we think to ourselves, okay, how are we going to communicate with them? Now, on this planet, there are no such thing as two species that can communicate together on each other's wavelength. They have to be like the dogs and the cats and us and find a common ground of signaling to each other. And we have a species with a much more complex mind, the dolphins, and we have no idea what their language means to them. We can only speculate about it. And this is because their brains are constructed differently from ours. And it's true of the dogs and cats too, and all of the other animals. Or if you look at a mouse and an elephant, the mouse cannot hear the elephant because its ears won't pick up a sound that low. The elephant cannot hear the mouse because its ears won't pick up a sound that high. The mouse cannot perceive the elephant because it's too big. The elephant cannot perceive the mouse because it's too small. They can be side by side and not even know one another exists. Now, you look at the world around us is like that. Now, aliens from another planet who were evolved in a different star system, perhaps with different light, wavelengths of light, a whole different ecology, everything different from this, are going to have radically different brains. They're not going to be even close to mammal brains. They're going to be brains that are very different from ours. And their whole perceptual process is going to be completely different from ours. And you can see in the communion letters, the efforts they are making to communicate are, when they try this, they don't always try this. They don't want to communicate in many cases. But when they try this, it's very difficult. And we have to, when you hear all of these things that people are saying, well, they told me this, they told me that. Come on. I mean, let's be real here. We may think they told us things, but they may not know how we understood what they communicated. And we probably will not know what they thought they were communicating either. The gap is going to be too great. And that's where we are with this right now. There's something here and something's going on, but the gap between us is so great, we can't really pin down what the heck it is.
That's really well said. That kind of strings it all together and fills in a lot of gaps, even myself had in my mind. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about sort of the same kind of question involving the beings, but more in terms of craft. A lot of people have said it's impractical, even if they are, on another planet, they're going to do what we do. And again, maybe this is just us using the human brain to think like a human, but we would probably send probes or craft or AI rather than creatures in a ship initially. So what are your thoughts on the fact that some UAP may just be AI bots, maybe grays potentially, could be some type of AI with a bit of, genetics mixed in? What are your thoughts on the whole AI phenomenon as it pertains to UAP?
I don't know of any connection. I mean, AI is a big buzzword right now, but I have no idea what that may mean. All I can say is that I once had a very profound physical experience with one of them who made 3 sounds, cries, and they were the most emotionally rich sounds I have ever heard. They were also the most precisely delivered sounds I have ever heard. The precision was almost supernatural in its effect on me. And I know that sounds weird but we don't have precision like that of any kind in our world. And it was so profoundly moving and so shocking that I love classical music. And it took me a year to be able to listen to a great string quartet again, because it all sounded muddy after the few seconds of those 3 cries. It was unbelievable. But you have 2 things here. You have enormous emotional resonance, and you have extraordinary machine-like precision. So what was I listening to? What was there? Was that essentially a perfect machine? What was it? Or was it a living creature so precisely organized that it was something like a machine on a higher level of being? Because the combination of super powerful emotional resonance and absolute perfection makes it sound like a super conscious machine.
Whitley, we're going to let you go here shortly. We know it's getting late where you're at right now, but we have a question from Michael Allens, which was a guest we've had on recently. He's an experiencer, and he's actually where you are right now. He's in England. That's where he resides, and he's asked a question on Instagram. He says, "What is Whitley's opinion on how the visitors' telepathic communication work? Is it biological or something else?"
I don't know the answer. I've experienced it somewhat, and I will say this though: there's something more than I've experienced telepathic communication once that sounded like a radio in my head. And I speculate in them about how that probably works. It probably has something to do with microwaves. And because you can induce sounds in a brain with microwaves fairly easily. And I don't think it's too far from being able to do that to being able to generate words in a brain. But there's another level of it, which I think is very, very important to understand and fairly pernicious, which is the ability to project thoughts into someone's brain that they don't know aren't their own. And one of the things being close to the hybrids, did for me is that I got a taste of what it's like to know that it's someone else's mind touching your mind. And I'm really sensitive to that now. And I have had it happen a few times since. But I think most people would have no idea that their mind was being entered by another mind. And I think that mind control would be quite easy for them. And I sometimes wonder if they aren't playing a game with us, and that, like all of our politicians, are their control, and people keep doing crazy things like Hitler or Putin, or the things that just seem to make no sense whatsoever and are terribly negative. And other people do extraordinary things and very positive things. And you have to wonder where we are, and we'll close with this, in the larger scheme of things. Are we independent entities, pieces on a chessboard, or something else that we ourselves have not yet fully understood? I think let's leave it there.
That is the ultimate question. Your latest book is called Them. Whitley, where can people find your book, and where can they learn more about you if they want to follow your work?
Well, it's pretty easy. They can find my book on Amazon. It's in Kindle, in paperback and hardcover. Probably find it on Barnes & Noble and other sites in paperback and hardcover. And it is available as an audiobook from Amazon or Audible or Apple Books.
Nice. Whitley, seriously, we can spend
I read it.
We could be talking about this for a whole weekend with you and probably still haven't scratched the surface of this phenomenon. But again, I want to say a huge thank you, not only from UAP Studies Podcast, but to all the listeners and supporters that you have out there. I know you don't get to meet you don't get to meet everybody, but you're a pioneer in this field of study along with a few other giants, and we really do appreciate your work and covering
this. Thank you very much for having me on. And
yeah,
you guys are a lot younger than I am, and thank God, keep the ball rolling, because it's going to be in your court very soon.
Oh, we appreciate that.
We'll carry that torch for you anytime, Whitley. We'd love to have you back again. And let's turn it over to our viewers. What did you think of today's episode? Good, bad, indifferent? Let us know. We love our feedback. And again, big thanks to Mr. Whitley Strieber. You're a busy guy. You're weathering a storm literally right now. We made this happen, and we really appreciate your time and love to have you back again in the future.
Thank you.